Hey everyone, I am Dimitar, Dimi for short, it's easier. And well, I'll talk to you guys about sort of seamless API mocking using MSW. We'll kind of learn what MSW is. Kind of a shorthand, has anyone heard of or used MSW before in their projects? All right, so most of you haven't, so hopefully you'll learn something cool, something new. But again, a little bit about me. Technical lead at nvisia, kind of passionate about front-end development, although I've been doing full stack for the most part, and some hobbies outside of, and interests outside of working, like with powerlifting, / weightlifting, reading and drinking. Kind of what we'll cover today, I want to give you a brief overview. So we are going to cover kind of a common problem most front-end developers will face. We'll kind of explain what that is. We'll explore what some of those existing solutions are, and then we'll kind of explore what also MSW is and how it's kind of better than some of those existing solutions, or why you might want to consider using it as an alternative. So consider a scenario, right? You have some sort of a UI and you have to incorporate some sort of a profile. My mouse visible? No, it's not. Okay, some sort of profile endpoint where maybe you click a button and you render a person's profile or something along those lines, right? But that's really kind of what it is, right? And so what's some problems that you might run into if today you start implementing this, right? Well, one, you might not have a backend, right? It's not ready, but you want to be developing, right? It's a pretty common scenario. A lot of times front-end folks and developers kind of pull ahead way faster than backend developers because you can just kind of spin up things on the fly. Or maybe your backend, you do have a backend, but it's down or it's unreliable, right? You can't be expecting to only be able to develop only when your backend is live. Or maybe your backend incurs charges when you make API calls. You don't want to be doing that. You don't want to pay extra bills for your development work. What if you have an infinite for loop or a while loop or any loop? Goodbye to your bank account. You don't want to be seeing those charges on your credit card. So really the big question here is, right, how can we keep developing, reliably and really efficiently without kind of dealing with all this, right? We don't want to have to rely on the back end. Well, the solution, as many of you may have guessed, it is mocking. But, kind of before we get into this MSW stuff, why do we want to mock our APIs, right? And I kind of alluded to this, but right, you really want to be able to decouple your front end from your back end, right? You don't want to have to rely on your backend folks to have everything done in order to do your front end development. You kind of want to just be able to say, like, hey, we're going to agree on this kind of a contract thing, and I'm going to implement the UI, you're going to implement your backend, and we're just going to kind of, when we're both done, the entire thing is done. Or you can develop offline, right? You don't have to kind of rely again on things being live. You don't have to spin up databases, services, anything like that. And obviously it's easy to demo, right? Sometimes you might have databases or services or anything where you gotta set up and demo edge cases. And you can imagine a scenario where you have like 5 databases, and for you to set up an edge case, you gotta have a specific record in every database to have a specific value. That sounds like a nightmare. You kind of want to be able to start mocking some of this out so you can show it to people, right? And so we'll explore some solutions here that you might have taken already as a kind of an approach to solving some of these problems, right? For once, maybe doing nothing, right? Maybe you just kind of wait till your backend is done, and then you're just like, good luck, guys. I will kind of do my work when everything's ready, Not an ideal solution. You could have hard-coded some code in your UI where you say, hey, instead of calling axials while I'm testing, or my fetch client or something, I might just return an actual value here with an object, right? That sounds great, but then if you've ever done this, you know that you gotta clean this up eventually, right? This is not something you keep in your production code. This is just while you're developing, right? So again, you're kind of writing this code so you can test stuff, and then you remove it. And we don't want to have that. Or I've seen people do like mocked out like modes, like, hey, if this is a mocked mode, if I'm running with a mock configuration, serve me this object, otherwise serve me the actual API call. That's kind of a little bit better, but again, you have this weird if conditional logic that really never runs in your production, or should never run, right? parade and you never get any issues that your mock actually gets hit into production. Or alternatively, right, you could connect to your own custom server where you do set up sort of your mocked endpoints. Like maybe you have a localhost 3000 or something, like an Express server running or a JSON server or something, and you can kind of hit all of those as you develop. And that does seem pretty ideal, or at least a lot better than most of these other options. But again, what do you do when you start unit testing your code or testing your code, right? Then you start mocking out your actual client, and that ends up being a pain, right? If anyone has ever mocked Axios or Fetch, you start kind of hating it at some point. It's like, man, I've mocked this thing so many times. And there are some middle ways, but regardless, it's a pain, right? You're writing redundant code and redundant things that you don't really want to be doing, right? That's kind of where this MSW thing comes in. We're gonna kind of talk a little bit about what it is, how it addresses some of these problems, and hopefully you guys will be able to get something out of this and realize that this is a pretty cool thing. So right, what is MSW? Well, MSW stands for Mock Service Worker. It is effectively an API mocking library that, as the name suggests, uses a service worker. Effectively, it lets you intercept all of your network calls, and it returns a response. And the nice thing is, all of this kind of lives in your browser. You're not spinning anything extra. You're just really intercepting things. And that's kind of what we'll talk about, a little bit of a segue, but what is a service worker? It will help explain why the mock service worker does things and how it does things. So service workers is a nice fancy definition here from the Mozilla developer, but it says service workers are specialized JavaScript assets that act as proxies between web browsers and web servers. So that's cool. It's a fun definition. What does it mean? Kind of the big thing I really want to focus on here, right? It sits between web browsers and web servers. Really lives inside your browser for all intents and purposes. And it has access to your browser's cache, local storage, etc., right? And what it is really, it's a JavaScript script that runs. So you can run anything that you can type out in code in JavaScript, you can have your mock or your service worker run. So you can imagine it acting as a proxy. So imagine you have an application, it wants to submit a network request to the web, to the internet, and instead of kind of doing that network request, what the service worker really does here is kind of hijacks that request, and it decides to do whatever it wants to do with it. It's kind of what you do programmatically. If you wanted to let it propagate the internet, you can do that. If you wanted to write a bunch of weird code like, hey, return me a random string, or if you could write Boolean logic, you could inspect that request, maybe return something from the local storage, anything. You can also do a different API call. Like let's say you're trying to fetch a Google API, you could tell like, hey, instead fetch me Amazon. Really, whatever. It's pretty much your own JavaScript code that reacts to a network in a way. Right, so that's kind of what it does here, right? It handles whatever it wants to do. It does its own logic, its code, it connects to different pieces of the network, and when it does that request, it kind of returns it back to your application. So really what this means is you have a request that you don't want to hit the actual backend for, or maybe you do, and you write some code on that. But what effectively it gets used for is, intercepting those requests and mocking them out and potentially doing logic on those mocks so that you can have a pretty seamless interaction. And the nice thing with mock service worker is that it does all of that. It's a library that does all of that, and it has a pretty nice API and just generally it's a library that's pretty seamless. And you'll see this in a little bit when I do a quick demo and some code snippets of how easy it is to set up and how seamless it is. But it's effectively something you can, and usually I run as a part of alongside my code. It lives in the code base, and it only spins up when I'm using a development environment. If it's a toggle flag, but if I want to run it or not run it, it's optional. And that's all it is. I don't have weird code in my actual production code that kind of checks for some of these things. It's all it does. It sits in the middle of my browser. My application makes API calls, and it kind of intercepts those, and it serves whatever I want it to serve, right? So it's kind of have this. It's seamless. It's got this deviation free, right? You don't want to be mocking out your backends, like having a weird localhost 3000, when your production API is potentially like, slash, my API slash profile slash whatever, right? You want to be able to inspect your network tab, and you want to be able to see that, hey, this is actually what's being called, but I'm just getting a mock response. That's kind of like what mock service worker ends up doing. And it's also got a pretty nice and familiar and powerful. If you ever done express stuff or express routing, kind of when you see how you match those URLs and parameters, you're gonna see that it's pretty familiar and it's pretty powerful. You can effectively do regexes on which routes you want to match, and have wildcards and subscribe to some parameters and listen to them and stuff like that. But I want to go over a little bit kind of how easy this is to set up. Really, all it takes, it's in a few minutes. All you have to do, install the library. Inside this is a file. This is some code, 5 lines that runs in my index. My index HTML calls a script, and this is pretty much what's in there. I import the setup worker from MSW. I've got some interesting setup worker function that it calls with some handlers. We're gonna kind of get into the next slides of what those handlers really are. And here I have arrayed my process, my environmental variable. Am I in development mode? If so, I want to start this service worker. So that's cool. Hopefully this slide isn't too small. I can zoom in if it is, and maybe I will actually. But I kind of want to dissect, this is what handlers are and look like in your mock service worker, and I'm going to show you what that looks alongside the code in a little bit. But let's see, can I also progress my slides while being zoomed in? Maybe not. Well, so first things first, I import the REST from the MSW. Then the main thing here you might notice, so I have a function, I call it fetch profile 200 success, and this effectively calls that REST MSW method, right? And here is where I register my mocked out URL. I want to path match my actual code on my front end calls this exact same URL, and this is what I'm path matching, right? So slash profile ID, and the next thing here is that it takes in these request, response, and context objects, and they are very much kind of what it sounds like. Your request has access to your full HTTP request that your UI would make, your Axios or your fetch client, and your response also has, effectively, it's how you formulate mock service worker to create that response for you. You can set headers, you can set, the actual response status, kind of whatever will really go in an HTTP response, and you have your context. And that's kind of what you set for the actual response body usually, and the actual response itself. So here you might see, this is kind of what that looks like. I have a context.status. I want to say, hey, when you intercept this request, return me with the status 200. You can mock out delay time, so loading time, if you want to simulate, see your spinners pop up or something like that. You can do a delay, and then you can do your actual response body, right? And so the nice thing here, right, you register your handlers, and that's kind of what we saw a few slides ago. That's where you set up your handlers. That's where you define everything that you want to currently run in your app. And if I kind of go back in, another nice thing you can do, kind of what I mentioned earlier, right? You can programmatically add code, so your mock endpoints can have logic behind them, right? So for example, in this case, I'm saying, hey, if I hit this endpoint with profile 1, give me a 200 status with the user. Otherwise, give me an empty object with a 404 status, right? So you can do all these scenarios, and you can effectively set up a full working UI where, hey, like almost user profile personas, or like, hey, I'm gonna make an admin collection of handlers, and I can just swap that into my UI mock demo. And if I want to demo an admin functionality, that's all it is, right? I have all these. So this is cool, right? But the other powerful thing it does is you can directly have it run inside your tests. You do not have to mock out Axios. You do not have to mock out fetch. You can set up your test containers, and, well, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but you can set your test containers to directly connect to your mock service worker, right? So you're no longer doing things that you might normally be doing, like, for example, if you were to use Axios, right? you might do axials that get mock result value, and then you might fire your stuff and wait. This works, and you might be asking like, okay, well, I'm already doing this. It's not that much setup. Why do I want to keep doing this? What happens if you update axials and things change? Your tests break, despite it still making its HTTP call potentially, right? Or you start using the fetch API. Your front end still works. You're still making that call, but your tests are all broken now. You got to refactor those, right? That's one example. That's a pain. But the other super nice thing is, right, you can reuse all of the handlers you're using when you're developing, sort of as you're kind of going through things and you're mocking your backend inside your unit tests. So this is kind of a refactor of what we just saw, but effectively what it lets you do is you can overwrite which handlers you want to use inside each unit test or each test in general. So here I've set up a test, right? I set it up and there's a server object from MSW where you can tell it to which handlers you want to use for your specific test. And effectively, it's almost acts like an integration test. You call your functions, you call your code, and you let it do axials or fetch or whatever you want to be doing, and it will just return you with that data, right? So you have all that like confidence in your test that it will do what it's supposed to, right? Because mocking your clients is okay, but you have to trust your clients to work as expected. This is kind of pretty much setting some of this up. So I'm going to do a quick demo, and it's really not too much. I have a quick app here. The main thing I want to pop or show here is, am I not running this? 1 second. Hopefully this will run without issues, because I did some changes at some point. There we go. So one thing you will notice when you run it, so quick thing I want to show here, right? All this code you saw for the setup and stuff like that, that's just running inside here. If I'm using the development environment, I'm using the start, all the profile stuff. It's a little bit different. I have an auth screen here, but the concept stays the same, and I have my worker and my handlers registered in a browser JS. So here's my handlers and what my handlers look like. I have so actually you would have seen an error, but I could swap a handler here, right? So I return a login 200, save it, rerun my app, and then here, for example, I do a login, sign in, and you can see, right, if I were to inspect my network tab, you can see actual requests running, right? So for example, here's my login request. If I inspect it, I can see I did a post request to my totally real auth API. It's not a real thing, obviously, right? But you can see in the the powered by here, and also the status code, you can see that this mock service worker is serving me this content.
Good beer choices, by the way.
Thank you. Got some more.
Yeah.
But if I kind of show you my handler for the for example, for the auth, right? What I have in my file is pretty much this, right? I have my post for my login. It sets up my status to be 200. I added some delay, which I've configured in my environment, and then here's some credentials. And when I log in, right, here's the welcome, John. And then if I were to look at the beer handlers, right, again, here's all of this stuff that is getting pulled into the page. And so the nice thing, right, you can see that this is working here, and you can imagine, hey, maybe I want to test my my errors, right, on my app. So all I have to do here is I go on my handlers, and then let's say my auth is working or isn't working, or I want to see how that works. Give that a go. So let's say I want it to give me a 401 unauthorized, and if I look at that handler, it's going to return me a 401, and it's going to give me a JSON with an error message I maybe want to display to the user, right? So if I just kind of rerun this and try to log in, here's my error. You can see kind of MSW, it tells you which requests get intercepted, and you can also inspect it in your network tab that it does in fact call this effectively non-existent API, right? But it does serve you that. And so the last thing I kind of want to show you before sort of leave it off, I have a test suite, kind of with really what I just showed here on the slides a little bit ago. I have setting up a success case, clicking that login button effectively and making sure things get redirected to a profile screen, and then that screen shows my name, for example. This is actually, sorry, this is the slide code you just saw. Nice. But this is right. This is the test stuff, and hopefully I haven't broken some of this because I did do some stuff again. But we will find out. Right. So here we are. Right. I had these tests. I wanted to do an unauthorized. I effectively clicks that submit button you saw me in the demo, and it makes sure that message is displayed. Right. So all these tests run, all these unit tests run, and they effectively run like integration tests. Right. Like, it really simulates what I just did, and I'm not mocking axials, I'm not mocking anything. It's doing the API call effectively, and it is intercepting it. So that's that. And then I don't want to go back in the slides, but you just have some here things you can look further into, right? We covered React, we covered Jest effectively a little bit, but MSW supports a lot more. It supports GraphQL, so you can, if you have GraphQL APIs, you could use that to mock your entire thing. It supports Angular and Vue, all the big frameworks. Cypress if you want to do your end-to-end stuff, really. But yeah, it's a pretty cool framework. It's pretty powerful. It integrates very nicely in your code base. If you look at my code, the way I structure files would be, I might have my modules. For example, I have the auth module. Here's my components inside of it, and then I have my mocks in here, right? This doesn't need to know anything about my code. My code doesn't need to know anything about this or serve anything. It's just there. It lives kind of alongside it, but not. It doesn't interact in effectively almost any way besides serving your calls. So that is all I have. Any questions? Yes.
Does MSW embed any like tools or patterns for being able to sort of save state? So let's say you had a REST resource, you want to be able to post to it in a test, and then get that resource, and then clean up your state at the end of a test.
I don't think directly, but because you have access to your local storage and stuff like that, you could effectively,
use
think
that,
up of something that might work.
Just even in memory state or something.
Exactly. Yeah. You could set all of that, and you can have it all of your tests and everything, even depending on how you set up your suites and clear. Even just again for your pulse, right? You could see that on your UI.
Right.
So, yep. Question?
So you mentioned something about path matching. You define the paths like in your handlers. What happens like if you send a request and it doesn't match any of those? Like, does the service worker block?
Yep. So
requests, or what?
I believe, I don't have that running, but I believe the service worker, I'm not sure what the default behavior is, but you can tell it to propagate the request to the actual API. So maybe you want to have a partial integration with your API. You don't have some of your endpoints ready, but some are done, so you want to kind of be able to test through that. And you can also kind of see, sorry, I'm running my tests again. You can also kind of see, because I am pulling some of these images from my CDN, you can tell it, hey, captured a request without matching the handler. And it's kind of going to tell you in a nice warning message. Well, it's awfully visible. But it's going to tell you a nice warning message that, hey, we haven't got this here. Maybe you're developing and you forgot to add a handler, and maybe it's going to, tell you, remind you, or it's just kind of something to know.
You can catch my stupid typos.
There we go. then you start wondering why your regex is not matching your URL. But yeah, cool. Other questions? Yep, back there.
Can you do like multiple threading for various endpoints?
Give me an example. Like
for example, like having different process initiated based on endpoint rather than one single thread responding to all the API requests.
So like register multiple workers effectively?
Yeah.
I've never had to do that. I don't see why you shouldn't be able to. It might get tricky with setting up things and kind of playing around with which worker catches what.
You just register multiple handlers with different URLs to
Probably, yeah. And then they all just run alongside and they
Yeah.
serve. Yeah, so most likely. But I've never had to do it, but interesting question. Yeah. Anything else? Cool. That is all I have on mock service workers. Hopefully, folks learned something cool. This is something I use directly in my development. I find it, I mean, again, right, it takes a minute to write something up like this, and you don't have to mock out weird if statements in your code and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty cool. I think it's nice and powerful.
It's like a nice alternative to mocking it in the tests. Like
Oh,
if
yeah.
you have unit tests and integration tests, you don't have to deal with like create mocks twice.
Exactly, yeah. It removes your duplication in all of your code because even in just your regular like development, right? Your life cycle, you kind of reuse the same scenarios you'd be testing normally when you develop in your tests and your integration tests, even your end-to-end test if you want to be using Cypress or whatever it may be. So you can kind of have like a full repository of all your objects that you might want to be testing with, and they get reused everywhere. But yep, that's all I got. Thanks everybody. We got Bruce somewhere.
Right here.
Oh, there we go. Hiding behind the blinds.
Hey guys, grab another beer. I'm gonna be a second before I get my last.
Fine. Yep.
More water.